Okay, this is my third take. Hopefully I can get this to work. This is the first lesson I'm trying to record for grade 9 applied. Hope all is well with all of you. We still have one more lesson to do from unit 3. This is lesson 5, using equation solving techniques on formulae. Then after that we're going to post a take-home test to the LMS and give you about 24 hours to complete it, and then resubmit it back to the LMS. So the first one we're going to look at is one involving a perimeter of a rectangle. So we've got this rectangular swimming pool. You're told the length is 10, the perimeter is 28. Then you have to decide which of the following formulas correctly represents the relationship between perimeter and length. And what I'm going to do, we don't have whiteboards in front of us, so at points in times I'm going to ask you to pause the video, and I'm going to ask you to try something on a piece of paper. So if you don't have a piece of paper, or you could be using the class note because you do have the package for this unit, if you could have a piece of paper handy. Because what I'm going to get you to do now is I'm going to get you to think about, here's the formula for perimeter, 2L plus 2W for a rectangle. You've got this number and you've got this number. What I would like you to do is place them where they belong in this equation. I'm going to pause the video now to give you time to do that, and while you're doing that, I'm going to be doing it on the smartboard. Okay, we're back now. So the perimeter was 28, that belongs there. It tells us the length is 10, so I have 2 times 10 plus 2W. So now we have this formula sitting here, and I am wondering which of these 3 down here would be correct. Which of those would give the correct relationship? So I'm going to give you some time to think about that. Do any of these represent this correctly? So I'm going to pause while you think about that. All right, so let's talk about potential solutions here. I asked you to do some work on your own and to think about it, and now I'm going to explain the work I've written down here. So we've got a half. I know that 28 is the perimeter, so I just put a P there, and I know that 10 is the length. So would the width be equal to half the perimeter minus length? Now let's think about this logically. Half the perimeter should be L plus W, right? All the way around is 2L plus 2W. So halfway around should be 1L here plus 1W. So I know this is true. That is correct. And then if I subtract L from half the perimeter, I will get W. So this one is correct. Now let's look at this one in here. This is the perimeter, and that's minus 2L. The perimeter minus 2L should not be 1W, it should be 2W. So this is wrong, and underneath it, I have written a correct version of it. This next one has that 2 times the perimeter minus L. So if you do double the perimeter, let's see, what would double the perimeter be? Double the perimeter would be 4L plus 4W. Now we're subtracting an L, right? 2 times the perimeter gives us 4 L's and 4 W's. This is going to give us 3L plus 4W. So that's not right. Because we've just shown down here that 2 perimeters would be 4 L's and 4 W's. When I subtract this L, these two are like terms. 4L minus L is 3L, so I have 3L plus 4W. So this side is 3L plus 4W. That's not the same as W. All right, heading on to the next page. All right, in this particular one, you're giving information about the cost of a cell phone. And that is right here. You're given this formula for the cost of a cell phone. Well, I'm going to do that over here. And then you're asked to decide which of these formulas would be correct. So the cost is equal to, that looks like 35 cents per minute, plus another 60 cents flat fee for something. So which of these equations correctly represents this relationship up here? Again, I'm going to give you some time to think about that. All right, we're back now. I gave you some time to think about this. What I decided to do was take this, it's really an equation listed as a formula, and I've decided to isolate this for t. I started by, I want to undo this piece right here, plus 0.6. The opposite of plus 0.6 is minus 0.6, so we're using the same techniques we were using before. And now to isolate for t, I need to undo this. This is 0.35 times t, so to undo this, I'm going to have to divide by 0.35. And so when we look down here, this was not correctly isolated for t, nor was this. This is the one that was correctly isolated for t. The next thing I'm going to have you do, and I'm going to pause the video, is now that we have this correctly isolated for t, this will give us the length of the call given a particular cost c over here. What I would like you to do is use this formula here. Paste that over there just so we can see it down here. That's the formula I want you to use. Plug that into there and figure out what the length of the call would be. Again, I'm going to pause the video, let you work on that, and I'm also going to be working on it at the same time. Okay, we're back. So the first thing we want to do is plug in 5.85, and then we have minus 0.6 divided by 0.35. If we subtract those two numbers, we get 5.25. When we divide that by 0.35, we get 15. So the length of this call happened to be 15 minutes. All right, let's look at the next slide. So Peter has 2 part-time jobs. His earnings for a week are based on this equation. Actually, maybe I should just wait a few minutes and let you look at this and read through it. All right, so E is his total earnings in 1 week. R is the number of hours he works at the restaurant. V is the number of hours he works at the video store. They've now given us this number. You need to decide now if this number here, is that E, his earnings for 1 week? Is it R, the number of hours he works at the restaurant? Is it V, the number of hours he works at the video store? And now you're given this 8 hours. Again, is that E, R, or V? You're going to plug the numbers in where they belong in this equation, and then you're going to isolate for the correct variable. Okay, I'm going to pause. I'm going to give you time to work on that again. Plug these numbers where you think they belong in this equation. They either go here, or they go there, or they go there. So you're thinking about this. What is this? What is this? And your choices are E, R, and V. Then after you plug them in, you're going to solve. So I'm going to pause the video now. And while you're working on your paper, I'm going to be working on the smartboard. All right, we are back now. So the 117.75 is E. The 8 hours is the restaurant, so that's R. So plugging in 117.75 in for E. I'm then going to plug in 8 for R. And that is going to give me 117.75 equals 60 plus 8.25 times V. I want to undo positive 60. The additive inverse is minus 60. So this becomes 117.75 minus 60, which is 57.75. I now have that's equal to 8.25. To undo multiplication by 8.25, I'm then going to divide 57.75 by 8.25, and then that's going to leave me with a V of 7. All right, so notice how we're doing substitutions now, but we're still applying our same technique. So here's a formula that had 3 variables, but we were able to substitute in 2 of the numbers and then apply our equation solving techniques. So we're very well versed in solving these particular equations. We tend to be using the variable x though, but we can still do this. All right, now we're going to look at modeling with formulas and make it a bit more abstract. A mathematical formula is going to show a relationship, so we know the relationship. This formula right now is set up to calculate area. If you give me a base and a height, then if I do base times height divided by 2, I'll have the area of a triangle. This formula right now is set up specifically to find the area of a triangle, but I could isolate it for some of the other variables, and I'm going to redo that over here just so we can see where that's coming from. Bend the page a little bit. So area is base times height over 2. The first thing I want to think about is how to get rid of that 2. B and H are both being divided by 2. So undo division by 2, I'm now going to multiply by 2, and I'm going to get 2 times A is equal to B times H. And now if I want to isolate for H, then I'm going to have to get rid of the B. The operation between the B and the H is multiplication, and to undo that, that would be a division. So I'm now going to have to divide by B, and then that's going to give me that 2A divided by B is equal to H. So now this formula says, it's set up so that if you give me an area and a base, I then return the height. So we can take any mathematical formula and isolate it for a different variable. All right, so here's an example of a question where they're giving us an area now. The formula is isolated for area. So they've given you the area, but they've told you that the base and height are equal. So think about where you're going to plug the 18 in here. Think about what it means for the base and height to be equal. Then I'd like you to determine the height of the sail. So as per usual, what we're going to do is pause now, and I'm going to ask you on your paper to be working this out. And while you're doing that, I'm going to be doing it on the smartboard. All right, we're back now. So I'm going to walk you through my solution, and you can compare it to your solution. So the first thing I noted was that they told us the area of the sail was 18. And they also told me that base was height. So I wrote that mathematically as base is equal to height. Into the formula that's sitting over here on the top right, I plugged in an 18 for the area, and I replaced B with H. So I now have 18 is equal to H times H divided by 2. What I want to do now is isolate for H, so I have to do that by undoing the 2 first. The operation between the H's and the 2 is a division. You undo division with multiplication. So now I'm going to have 18 times 2 is equal to H squared. 18 times 2 is 36. We now have 36 is H squared. And then I need to undo this. Well, how do you undo squaring? You undo it with the square root. So I now have the square root of 36 is H, and then that gives me that 6 is H. So the height of this sail would end up being 6. All right, let's move on to the next page and see what's next. All right, I'm going to post the answer for these online. So maybe I'll model how one would work. So let's suppose if we were in class, you'd be doing this with a partner, but maybe you can do this with a parent or a sibling. So they would give you a card, and I will make sure these cards are uploaded online. So let's say they give me this card, and the card says y equals mx plus b. And then they would have to tell me what I am isolating for. And if they ask me to isolate for y, they're very kind because it's already isolated for y. But they might ask me to isolate for m or x or b. Let's suppose they ask me to isolate for m. I'm going to show you how I would do that. So the first thing I'm going to do is I have to get rid of this term, the b. And I will do that by thinking about what its opposite is. I'm going to fix that so it looks like a b. So the opposite of plus b is minus b, so the additive inverse. We're now down to y minus b is equal to mx. And now I'm going to focus on isolating for m. I have to undo the x. And the operation between the m and the x here is multiplication, so I'm going to have to undo that with a division. So I'm now going to need to divide by m. And then let me just extend this page ever so slightly. And then I would now have that y minus b divided by m is equal to x. So that's how these would be done. I'm going to suggest you do this at home. You have someone work with you. The answers will be on the back side of the card. And again, I'll make sure all of this is uploaded so you can look at the electronic copies. All right, the next slide. These are just some more example practice problems, and the solution to these will be online. So they're going to be done the same way that we were doing them before, right? So read all the information, find the formula. So just walking you through sort of the first one. There's the formula. That's height. That's the amount of time. What's the height of the water if the tap has been leaking for 56 minutes? I now just decide, is that H or T? And clearly that's a t, so now I'm just going to be solving 0.5 times 56 plus 2. And half of 56 is 28. And 28 plus 2 is 30. And our units are centimeters, so 30 centimeters would be the height. Okay, so I'm going to suggest that you then try to finish these off, and then we'll post the solution to that kind of stuff online. And then that would have been the end of our lesson in class. And hopefully this made sense to you. So I'm now going to post this video, and if you have any other further questions, you can contact us.